I guess, the blood. So you might both see it as blood, but you'd say, oh, I saw some red stuff on the ground or whatever. I don't know. Okay, that kind of was probably not a very good example. I shouldn't use blood, but anyways, so that basic issue with perception, or the unknown, I guess, of others' perceptions, is a thing I wanted to hit on. And where does that kind of lead us to? So, language is nature. So here's the thing. I mean, I've thought about this for a while. I know other people have. I've read, other philosophers and stuff. We all have our ways of speaking. We have, our idiosyncrasies. We have our choices of words that we use, very often, or maybe not. I don't know. Or the things about our, even our behaviors, our body language, idiosyncrasies too, that we kind of, overt, in communication on a regular basis. And other people have different ones. And even but here's the big thing. So our reaction in general is fairly consistent to stimuli. I mean, if we both, both got our, cotton candy taken from us when we were kids, we'd probably be pretty sad. I mean, you probably would, cry, or try to go take it back or something like that. But like how would you describe it? Would be fairly consistent. I mean, we might use a couple of different words, but the meaning, I guess, that we want to communicate by those words might be a little bit different. In general, it's pretty consistent, probably, with someone stealing your cotton candy when you're a little kid, but perhaps it's not in all situations. So especially when you get to talking about philosophy or religion or some of those more controversial areas, that's when words begin to the meanings behind the words become very important. And people have different meanings because people have had different exposures to the words. I mean, maybe for you, for a lot of your life, you called something else. You called a feeling that you had, you called it gratitude, and maybe someone else saw that feeling, or was brought up calling it more something like thankfulness. And so when you say gratitude, you think of that's what happens. That's what you feel when, or that's what you give thankful during like when you receive a gift or something like that. Maybe other people thought of gratitude more as something that is given when someone gives you a compliment, whereas thankfulness is more given for the gift. And so there's those differences there, and those things can actually bloom into very big differences in, I guess, when you come to understanding of words or concepts, especially higher order ones. Like people argue all the time about like, I don't know what is socialism, or exactly. I mean, there's different variants of it, all this different stuff, and what's the crux of it and everything like that. Is it a liberal? Is it a right wing? Is it a conservative, right? Or is it what exactly are some other words that you might tie to it? Different people might have different words, and they might use it depending on what they know about it. This is the concept. So maybe like I said, socialism. Maybe they know mostly maybe they actually experience socialism in like Latin American country, or maybe they experienced something that was called socialism in Russia back before the fall of the Soviet Union, or maybe very early Russia, or maybe even today some people in France or something like that might have some form of belief of the word socialism from experience. And maybe some people it's from reading books and such, that they might have slightly different, they might have arguments about the definitions and such. Ultimately though, what they're arguing about, they might are arguments even about the words themselves. The word socialism, what is it? What does it mean? Blah 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 blah. I mean, you can get all sorts of. You can go put that on the internet, and there, people will argue about it back and forth. And it's because of people's differences in twofold areas. It's kind of the nature, and it's kind of the nurture. First off, it's what it was that was presented to them throughout their lives, or what is it that they garnered from their education, their world experiences and such. The other one is, of course, their nature, their very their genetic code and everything like that. I mean, your eyes might be farther apart, closer together. That's a bad example. Or you might, hear things different. Different levels of hearing might of something communicated to you, or even different text in a book or something like that might actually cause there to be a different perception of what it is that someone's talking about. Or maybe you have a predisposition towards certain types of behaviors, or maybe something's more acceptable to you. It's not so. Maybe some things are repulsive to some people just naturally, and maybe they're not so much to others. So when you read it and you associate that with I guess the other parts of what the word might mean, then what you might have is a completely different, I guess, take on it. And you might, all your other words and all your other connections and such might be changed. So that goes to the language nature. So yeah, so I mean, basically words they're an approximate form of communication, such as and body language too, and as such, that's where we have a lot of conflicts in our world, because we don't have the capacity to give direct forms of communication. There's no way I can actually show you exactly what I'm seeing. For one thing, I can't even prove that you have perception. I can prove beyond reasonable doubt that you, obviously are able to do some form of whether or not you're actually perceiving it or not, you can't tell. But I can I can give you some math problems, you can solve them, give them back to me. I can give you Chinese, you can translate it to English, give it back to me, and I can say, oh yeah, good job, if I knew Chinese. But so there's a lot of different things that we can use to prove that others have capacities and such, but not necessarily perception. And words are they're only an approximate form of communication, because they aren't perfect. You can get words pretty darn close. You can if you get in a real good debate with someone who's of a similar mind, though, that's the thing. If you have someone who's a completely different brain, like a person that doesn't has a completely different view, maybe has no concept of a code of ethic or anything like that, or someone that has a very stringent code of ethic, you might not be able to get very far, because the words they will even use, or even the usages on those words, the connections and such, or maybe some people don't even have the capacity to I guess understand or perceive certain emotions or certain thoughts that are tied to words. And when you have those difficulties arise, then you're kind of stuck, because there's no other thing we can do. But that kind of brings me to how physiology plays into perception. So obviously, I just kind of talk about the nature part of language and understanding. So we all have our own physiologies. It's a mixture of our genes and our upbringings and our choices made. If you have did a lot of LSD and such, your physiology might be changed a little bit in your brain. Likewise with any other kind of drugs, or the foods you put in, or the exercises, or the air you breathe, the water you drink, all those different types of things. Whether or not you broke a leg, you're going to release some chemicals into your body, which will cause a slightly different physiological response in your brain, and you might have a different I guess perception of the world than you would have had you not had your leg hit. So those physiologies do play a very important part. When looking to the brain, we can see differences in people in how they process information. And obviously, that makes sense when we have people that are Nobel Prize laureates, and we have people that are mentally handicapped, can't take themselves to the restroom. So when you realize that, you see that there are not realized. But what you get from what I'm trying to say about that is the fact that you have a whole bunch of differences in people. That are there. That you can see, right? So, or processing in the brain. That shouldn't come as a surprise that we have different processing. But what is kind of interesting though is we have different processing. Obviously, like in emotional areas too. So not so much that there are differences, but that sometimes they're actually very, very, very very significant, very apparent, very. So you have some people that when they are given like emotional stimuli will have a completely different response in the brain from those who have were given the same emotional stimuli. So and I'm trying to get to here is the fact that psychopaths